بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد، فحياكم الله جميعا وبارك الله فيكم. Alhamdulillah, in the previous lesson we, as you know, concluded our discussion around the biographies of the 10 guaranteed Jannah, the 10 from amongst the companions guaranteed Jannah. And we generally know that as individuals they are mentioned as the companions that carry from the most amount of virtue, the companions that carry the most amount of virtue. And the reason why they are mentioned specifically in terms of their fadl, their virtue, the Ashra Mubashirin bil Jannah, is due to the fact that they are mentioned all in one narration. So it's not that it's exclusively those 10 that will be the individuals that are guaranteed Jannah from amongst the companions. Naam, because rather there are others that are mentioned from the companions that are guaranteed Jannah. However, they're not mentioned all in one narration or all at one time. And so with that, we mentioned them. And before we begin, who can remember who they are, or who the 10 are? We mentioned this previously, so inshallah, anyone that was present, which is majority of you, I believe, should be able to recount who they are. The 10 Ashra Mubashirin bil Jannah. And as I said, I believe last week, I know most of you by name, so if no one puts their hand up, I have to call you by your name. نعم تفضل.
ليس العشرة أبو بكر وعمر.
أبو بكر وعمر هذا الاثنان، فبقي 8.
ابن اليمان
أبو بكر وعمر، ده صح. سعد بن أبي وقاص. نعم. طلحة، زبير، عثمان. How many was that now? تسلسل. التسلسل أحسن، لكن بعدهم إن شاء الله. نعم. They said 6, I believe. Ali ibn Abi Talib and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. 2 left. Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. I said it. He's next to you. He said it. No thanks. Abu Ubaidah. 1 more. Ali's been mentioned. He hasn't. That's a 10. Sa'id ibn Zayd. طيب. That was musharaka. That was Allahumma barik. Everyone worked together for that one. Who could do it by themselves though? The Ashra Mubashirin bil Jannah, ikhwan. Who are they? All you need to do is repeat the names you just said. تفضل.
أبو بكر عمر عثمان علي.
أبو بكر عمر عثمان علي. طلحة زبير أبو عبيدة. سعد بن أبي وقاص. سعيد ابن زيد. You asking me? سعيد بن زيد. Rahman bin Auf. Talha. Now, 10. And so this is the first one we mentioned in the last lesson. We covered the Ashra Mubashirin bil Jannah to some extensively, mentioning their biographies. Thereafter, we began our discussion around the Imam, the ruler, and the Mu'amala, the dealings with the ruler. And discussed a bit the importance of obedience to the ruler. We also mentioned how many ways Islamically can a ruler be established? Three, mumtaz. And do you remember what they are? Ahlul Hal wal Aqd. Who are they?
Al-ulama, al-umara, the people.
So the Ahlul Hal wal Aqd. So they are the ones that choose the ruler, and they are the scholars,
the leaders,
other leaders,
the men skilled with politics,
those that have knowledge of politics,
and the military leaders,
and the leaders of the military. Jade. So they may choose. An example of that was the Khilafah of who? Abu Bakr. The Khilafah of Abu Bakr was established in that manner. What's the second way of the freedom? We'll ask someone else, because you know that's a good answer. What's the second way that the leaders can be established? The shura is Ahlul Hal wal Aqd. The ruler establishes who the next ruler will be. Now, so the ruler establishes who the next ruler will be. Now, an example of that is the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab. For indeed, he was established as the ruler by who? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who proceeded. And then we have the third manner, which is what? Mughalaba, which means the rulership is seized. So there's a void, and then the rulership is seized and is recognized as the ruler. Now we mention an example of who?
Yazid ibn Muawiyah.
Naam, Yazid. Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Or Abdul Malik ibn Marwan after Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Well, so that's what we mentioned, is how rulership is established. Then we touched upon how rulership should not be established. And we mentioned what?
Democracy.
Democracy. Intikhabat. This voting in elections. We said it's pertinent because this is something that is going to occur in this country. Allah Ta'ala knows best. In this country within a few weeks. And the reason why it's pertinent to discuss it now, because these things occur, and then the question arises, of course. The question will be asked, can we engage in these elections and the likes of that? What did we say as points of discussion regarding elections and democracy?
Elections give freedom of society.
So the democracy is built upon what?
Freedom of society.
Freedoms. So the democracy itself is built upon qawaid, principles around freedoms. Okay? And so we mentioned one of them, which was, did you mention?
Freedom of society.
Freedom of society. And societal freedom. What does that mean?
They choose what's right and what's wrong.
They choose what's right and what's wrong, what's acceptable in terms of society. So what is regarded as being acceptable in terms of living in society, what does that lead to? Specifically?
You can do what you want, basically. Choose whatever religion you want.
No, not necessarily that. If we're saying for societal freedom, specifically societal freedom. So we're talking about the freedoms of society and relationships.
Zina.
This is zina, the breakdown of the nasab, the breakdown of the lineage, and the likes of that. Also, we mentioned other freedoms that is built upon, or they state. Anyone remember?
Freedom and rulership.
Freedom of religion. So it says you have freedom of any religion. Choose whatever religion you want to be. And that the society has to accept that from you. And that a democratic society accepts whatever you are upon by way of your ibadah. Whether you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, whether you worship anyone from the Anbiya or Salihin, or you worship the ashjar, the trees or the stones, or which is pertinent in this land we live in now, they don't worship anything or anyone. Ilhad. That the people are atheists. Everything is open and is free. So, So it's freedom of religion. What else did we mention as well? Other freedom.
They commit khuruj against their leaders by voting them out.
That's the next part, the answer. Right. There's something else, another freedom though, that we mentioned, that is built upon. Another freedom. So we mentioned freedom in society, societal freedoms. Means society, freedom in relationships. And legislation. Naam. So then freedoms when it comes to the qawaneen, the lawmaking, legislations. So we mentioned these things. So, and so, as we know, of course, this word freedom is one which is used as a fair seeming word. Why? Because it's presented as something where a person is not restricted, and restriction is something which is bad and negative. But no doubt, we are bound by the hudud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when a person says he has freedom, then of course this is fi maqabil, this is opposite of the matter of a person being a slave, or not being, not having the emancipation. And so, no doubt, if a person says freedom or presents freedom as opposition to slavery, then of course it's fair seeming. It's something which should seem as upright and good, and something that we should strive to establish within nations. However, as Muslims, we understand that we are the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are worshippers of Allah, and that everyone is a slave of Allah, in shit or bait. If you agree or not, that you are all slaves of Allah, and you are tahta mashiatillah, and you're bound by the sharia of Allah. If you're here to it, you adhere to it. If you don't, you don't. But you're bound by it. And so, when we establish these things, these freedoms, and no doubt this directly opposes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for us to adhere to. So that's the other manner. So, as for specifically with the voting, then why is this problematic?
Because anyone can vote.
Naam. So this is something that directly opposes Ahlul Halli wal Aqd. Directly opposes it. So now everyone has a say. Everyone's vote counts the same. Irrespective of if you're someone that has khibra, you're an individual that has experience and knowledge of lawmaking or politics, or you have life experience, or you have no life experience, doesn't matter who they are. Everyone gets a say, and the say is equal. But everyone's, them as in terms of their qualification to speak, is not equal. It's not equal. And so this, barakallahu feekum, is from the reason. So it's not just. No, it's not just. Also we mentioned what? You mentioned it earlier. You take part in the legislative process as well. So you take part in the process of people establishing legislation and this freedom of legislation which opposes the legislation that Allah Ta'ala has set forth and set for us within the nusus, the kitab wa sunnah. So you engage in that. Now, because what essentially you're doing is you're engaging and you are picking individuals to establish these laws that are in opposition to that. What else? Naam, it's a manner of khuruj as well, through the ballot box. As is stated, people will say that if you're not happy with your government, then remove them at the ballot box. Remove them when you vote. And so these are all manners of that particular affair and what we discussed last week. And as for today, then we continue, barakallahu feekum, with the speech of al-Barbahārī, raḥimahullāh. He mentions that it's established by ijma' as well. The rulership established by way of ijma'. I mentioned that previously as well. Based upon, and ijma' is proof in of itself, based upon the narration of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that my ummah will not unite upon falsehood. So if the Muslims unite upon a matter, we know this is haqq. If the Muslims unite upon a matter, this is haqq. And thereafter, Barbahārī mentions as the final point here, يعني لا يحل لأحد أن يبيت ليلة ولا يرى أن ليس عليه إمام برا كان أو فاجرا. And so it's not permissible that an individual, he goes to sleep that night and he does not perceive that he has an imam, whether that imam, that ruler be a one which is righteous or a disobedient ruler. And so what we understand from this is that لا يجوز الإنسان أن يخرج عن جماعة المسلمين. So what is meant by way of this now is that the individual, he cannot now live and there's a ruler upon him, but then he doesn't regard this as his ruler. He disregards this individual as his ruler. Because with this, barakallahu feekum, with this, you find that now this is the beginning stages of khuruj. So all it takes is one individual to say, I don't regard him as being my imam. He's not my imam. And then he begins a da'wah in that matter. Because now he's an individual الذي فارق الجماعة. He's the one that's left off the jama'ah. So you have the jama'ah of Muslimin. Now you have the body of the Muslims. And they have an imam. They have their ruler. And then with that, this individual says, I don't regard him as my ruler. He disregards him. Now this is the beginning stages of that. And so, this is from the manner in which he has left off this matter of ta'ah, in obedience to the ruler. And so, if he was an individual that was to go to sleep one night, disregarding that ruler, then he has thrown away that rope of Islam from his neck, as mentioned in the narration. He has thrown away khala'a wa raqbat al-Islam min unuqihi. That he has thrown away, I disregarded that rope of Islam that is bound around his neck. And so, what we understand from that, as Shaykh al-Fawzān, he mentions, أنه كان مع المسلمين. نعم مرتبطا مع المسلمين. فلما خرج عن طاعة الإمام فإنه قطع ارتباط بالمسلمين. And so the Muslims are tied together. The Muslims are bound to one another. The Muslims are bound to one another. This is why you have the mention of he disregarded, he's taken this rope from the neck and thrown it away. Disregarded it. Because the Muslims are bound to one another. And now within this action, the person has disregarded that. And so he's taken that thing that binds him to the rest of the Muslims. But he's left off the jama'ah. And he's left off the ta'at to the imam. Because no doubt, in Bab Ola goes about saying, if a person now disregards the person as an imam, then of course he's going to disregard obedience to him. Ta'atuhu. Because he doesn't regard him as an imam in the first place. And so with that ta'ah, that's what binds the Muslims together. That's what holds the jama'ah together. That they're under one particular imam. And so, the Shaykh gives the example of the aghnam, the cattle. You have the sheep and the goats. And they're tied together by way of one rope. Naam. And so, no doubt, if one of them comes loose from that rope and leaves the rope that they're all bound together by, then he'll become lost. He'll be left off and become lost. And so the Ijtima' Muslimin is with one particular imam. And so if that, for example, now that goat goes off, it gets lost, then of course it's susceptible to predators and the likes of that. And this is the case. If the person leaves off the Jama'ah of the Muslims, then what will occur except that he will face greater harm. He'll face greater harm. And the predator in terms of this scenario would be the predator, the shaitan. The shaitan coming to devour the individual and lead that person astray. Thereafter, we have the next statement of Imām al-Barbahārī, where he mentions the Hajj wal-Ghazw. تفضل يا توفيق والحج والغزو.
الحج والغزو مع الإمام والصلاة والجماعة خلفهم جائزة ويصلي بعدها 6 ركعات
يفصل
بين كل ركعتين هكذا قال أحمد بن حنبل.
نعم. تفضل حسين.
The author raḥimahullāh said, performing the pilgrimage and waging battle must be along with the leaders. Observing the Jum'ah prayer behind them is permissible, and 6 rak'ah should be observed after it, separating between every 2 rak'ah. This is the view of Ahmad ibn Hanbal.
And so, barakallahu feekum, here, what we find is Imām al-Barbahārī rather. He mentions some of the actions that are done with the leader. So we established in our previous lesson, in the previous point, how the leader is established. And that the leader upon us is ta'ah. And one point as well we didn't go over, or we mentioned but we didn't go over today. In terms of that ta'ah, in terms of that obedience to the imam, how does that ta'ah occur? Is it absolute? That's my question. No. Is it absolute obedience? No. What's your proof?
It says obey Allah and the Messenger and those in charge over you.
No. أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. So Allah Ta'ala, He mentions أطيعوا Allah, obey Allah, وأطيعوا الرسول, and obey the Messenger. Yani this is absolute obedience. When Allah Ta'ala commands of a matter, there's absolute obedience to Him. Tabarak wa Ta'ala. When the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam commanded of the matter, it's absolute obedience. Then after Allah Ta'ala mentions within the ayah, وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ, and those that have been given authority from amongst you. So, doesn't mention the amr, the fil amr ati'u, because it's not an absolute obedience. How does the obedience to Imam occur then, barakallahu feekum?
Only in what pleases Allah and not what displeases Allah.
Only what pleases Allah and not what displeases Allah. This is what Imām al-Barbahārī mentions. Sah? Barbahārī mentions this. And only what pleases Allah and displeases Allah. However, even though Imām al-Barbahārī mentions this point here, Shaykh Rabi' in his explanation of this particular point, he mentions, hafidhahullāh, that what is more precise to mention is in everything that is not disobedience. Na'am, in everything that is not disobedience. So it's not that the action has to be ibadah or something which is from the khairat. Doesn't have to be something which is necessarily an actual ibadah or good. Yeah, because this, if we're talking about an action that is pleasing to Allah, we're talking about ibadah, of course. Doesn't have to be that. What we understand is that the person has to obey the leader in everything as long as it's not disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Na'am, in everything as long as it's not disobedience to Allah ta'ala. And the proof of that is the narration that we mentioned here, لا طاعة للمخلوق في معصية الخالق. Na'am. And so there's no obedience to the creation when it comes to disobedience to the Creator. Now, there's no disobedience. There's no obedience to the creation when it comes to disobedience to the Creator. So, if anyone from the creation now commands with the disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's no obedience to them. And so this is why we mentioned that this obedience to the ruler is one which is of no doubt strength and high regard, but it's not absolute. And it's not absolute. So with that, barakallahu feekum, we understand what has been laid out in terms of the actions that need to be done along with the ruler, or the actions that are done along with the ruler. So Barbahārī, he mentions here, from these actions, Hajj, performing the Hajj, or the Ghazw, performing or going into battle, or Jihad. As well as he mentions Salatul Jum'ah. Now he mentions the Salatul Jum'ah. And so, what we understand from that, first and foremost, is that this matter of the Imam is one that carries great virtue. One that carries great virtue. And to the extent that the Imam of a land or a people, he is their Imam in their salawat as well. So here, Barbahārī, he mentions the Salatul Jum'ah. Now, he mentions Salatul Jum'ah. However, what we know from this is that this is not just specific to Salatul Jum'ah, but the Salatul Jama'ah amuman. Generally, Salatul Jama'ah. So, any of the Salatul Jama'ah, when it comes to the 5 salawat, the Salatul Jum'ah, the Salatul Eidain, all of this is the mas'uliyah of the Imam. All of these is the responsibility of the Imam. Is that clear, Ikhwan? Hence why, this is why we have this particular ruling. Now, the particular ruling of one that inshallah you're aware of, that if you're within the home of an individual, the Sahib al-Bayt, the person whose home it is, he's the Imam. He's the one that will lead the people in Salah. Now, because it's his home. It takes the same ruling. Why? Because he is the Imam of that household. He is essentially the ruler of the household. So because he's the ruler of the household, he takes that responsibility. Is that clear? When can that change? No.
When the leader gives the...
If we're talking about the household, for example, we'll talk about the household now for now, in the macro sense, if you like. When does that change, that particular hukum? Now, the first half is right, the second half, not necessarily. The first half, now, if you appoint someone else, but that's how it ends. That's it. As long as he appoints someone else, then that person is the Imam. Now, irrespective of the reason, Brother mentions that it could be because his recitation is not as good as the one that he appointed, or his hifz of Quran is not as good as the one he's appointed. That could be from the reasons. Or he could be like, I want you to lead. And it's his home. He's the Imam of that home. So he appoints that individual. So now that's the Imam of the Jama'ah. He's the appointment of the Imam of the home. So that's in the smaller sense. And the sense that, and the reason why I mentioned that first is because that's the scenario essentially that we will come across more as individuals ourselves. Now, however, on the grander scale, you have the Imam of a land. Now the ruler of a land. And he has the authority to lead the salawat within that land. So he has the authority to lead the salawat within that land. So because of that, anyone that he appoints as the Imam is placed in the place of the Imam in place of that leader. Does that make sense? So an example is where we have in Saudi Arabia. Now you have every masjid has an Imam appointed by the Wizara Islamiyya, the Islamic Ministry. The Islamic Ministry, of course, acts on behalf of who? The king, the ruler. So they act on behalf of the ruler. They appoint the imams. So now it's not for anyone to say that we're going to, because the imam's not here or for whatever reason, the salah starts at 7:30, it's 7:31, come on, the fulan, go and lead. No, it's not for a person to do that. Why? Because he's been appointed, it's a matter of rulership, leadership. This person is not only leading the people in salah, he's leading the people now according to the ruling from the leader of the land. So this is why it's established in some of the rulings in some of the books of fiqh. It mentions how the imam himself, when it comes to the imam, there cannot just be anyone that just puts himself in place of the imam. If a masjid has an appointed imam, and it can be also mentioned as well in relation to the masajid we have here. So generally you have the masajid, and a masjid will have a shura. A specific individuals that appoint people of responsibility. So now that's their responsibility. The shura's responsibility is to establish the salah in the masjid. So the shura, they have to pray, lead the people in prayer, unless they place someone in that responsibility. So now, with that being said, if now there's an appointed imam in a masjid, it cannot be now for anyone to say that I'm going to lead the salah because of whatever reason. Now, whilst there's an appointed imam. And so, due to that, it mentions that the imam, the people wait for the imam to come to lead the salah. If he comes late, the people wait. If now, however, you find that there's a particular rule or there's a particular nizam, system within a masjid or a land, where they say if the imam comes if the imam has not arrived after X amount of time, then lead the salah, that's when you can lead the salah. Anything else has opposed that particular ruling. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Jayyid. Along with that, it mentions as well that the imam, of course, has a particular, we're talking about the imam al-salah even now, we're still talking about imam al-salah. He has a particular standing, and a high standing with the people. He's leading the people in salah, the greatest form of ibadah, of the shahadatain. So now, Shaykh Fawzān, he mentions that an individual should not attend a masjid which is further away from their home. Why? You want to know why?
It's like a pattern upon the imams that are closer to you.
Essentially, it could be a ta'an, or it could just essentially bring about suspicion about the imam that is in the masjid closest to you. So it brings about suspicion when it comes to the imam which is in the masjid closest to your home. Because the people will see you in this masjid further away, and they know where you live, and they'll be like, why is he not praying in the masjid next to his house? And so it brings about questions regarding the one that leads the people in the prayer. And so this is something which is not regarded as the correct way to go about things. However, this is when we're talking about all the masajid are upon one thing, one i'tiqad, one manhaj. If now we're talking about here, Britain, for example, it's not the same thing. A person now, of course, his himmah, his striving is going to be to pray the salah with Ahlul Sunnah, with the Salafiyin. And so it's not going to be a case of, why didn't you pray in that Deobandi masjid next to your house? No, of course not. Because you would establish the salah with Ahlul Sunnah. And so this is something which is slightly different, referred to that. And so now, Barbahārī mentions specific points. The first of them is in regards to, the first thing mentioned is regards to the imam is given authority over the salah, Salatul Jum'ah and Eidain. And the Muslims pray behind him. إِلَّا أَنْ يَخْتَارَ الْحُوَى, except for if he chooses an individual. And so, you may find that imam, he chooses from amongst the ulama and the tulab al-ilm to lead people in the salah. However, the asl, the foundation in this, and the origin of this, is that he has the most right to lead the people in the salah. Naam. And this is an example of a good imam, a good ruler. He leads the people in the salah. He leads the people in ta'ah. He leads the people in obedience. The greatest obedience is the salah. The greatest obedience is the salah. Now, an example of that as well is something that we experienced when we were in Jami Islamiyah. And one of the new mudir came. And he started to lead the people in the salah. He started to lead the tulab al-Jama'a, the students from the university, in the salah, Salat al-Dhuhr, which is the most busy salah, in the Jami'ah. I don't know what it's like now, but then this was when everyone has finished their lessons, and so before you go home, you pray the Salat al-Dhuhr. So it's almost like every single student is in the masjid at that time. Now you can imagine thousands of students in the masjid at that time, Salat al-Dhuhr. And so he led us in the salah, an example of that. So the second thing mentioned as well is the Hajj. And the ruler leads his people in Hajj. And the one that's able to do so leads his people in Hajj. For indeed, as mentioned here, he is the one that's able لِيَنْظُرَ فِي مَشَاكِلِهِمْ. He's able to take into consideration the issues that they may have in Hajj, or problems that may come across in Hajj, because he's their ruler. So he leads them in Hajj. And of course, no doubt this is from the Sunnah, or the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that when he performed the Hajj with his companions, and he led the people as their ruler. So he led the people. So not only is the salah from the action that the ruler does and leads the people in, but also the Hajj. Thereafter, he mentions, ثالثا, إقامة الجهاد, establishing jihad. Establishing jihad. That the jihad is established with a ruler. You have an imam when you establish jihad. And he is the one that organizes the groups. And he is the one that organizes those that will fight in the battle, as well as placing those that are the umara, the rulers or the leaders amongst the junud. So the rulers or the leaders amongst those that are fighting. And so he is the one that establishes that system for jihad against the adu. And so what is understood from this, when mentioning this kalima jihad and mentioning the matter of jihad, then the jihad is from the salahiyat al-imam, walaysa jihad fawda. And so it's from the responsibilities and the actions of the imam to establish the army, and that jihad is not one which is fawda. Jihad is not a matter of chaos. وَكُلَّ مَنْ أَرَادَ الْحَمْلَ السِّلَاحِ وَيَقْتُلْ. It's not a case that everyone that wants to carry a weapon and then he goes out and fights and kills. No. And everyone that wants to carry a weapon goes out, fights, kills and attacks people. This is not the jihad which is established in the Quran and the Sunnah. And so with that as well, and this is not jihad fi sabilillah, it's not manaddam. That's not something which is established in an ordinal manner. It's not an ordinal manner. So with that as well, I just want to mention some speech from Shaykh Zayd in relation to that. Because he mentions that these actions, or Shaykh Fawzān here, he's mentioned that these actions where you have fawda, chaos, and they say it's all in the name of jihad. They say it's all in the name of jihad fi sabilillah. The reality is that these are the actions of those that have fallen into irham. They've fallen into actions of terrorism. But they say it's in the name of jihad. So it's كلمة الحق يريد بها باطل. It's a كلمة الحق, so a word of truth intending باطل, intending falsehood. And this is the reality of these individuals and these groups. That you find from these groups, they may give themselves a name based upon that which is khair. They're good at names of khair, but in reality they're upon batil. For example, you have the individuals that may refer to themselves as Hizbullah. Hizbullah, as Allah Ta'ala mentions, هُمَ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. They're the ones that are the successful. But they're successful according to their adhering to the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And so those the ibra, that which we take importance of, and we have our focus upon, is the haqa'iq, the realities, wala bil asma, not the names. So now, just because someone says the word jihad, and jihad itself is something which is mahmud, something which is praiseworthy, it doesn't mean now the action that these individuals have done is one which is praiseworthy. Rather, opposite of that. Rather, the opposite of that is true. And so here, Shaykh Zaidi mentions some examples of actions that people do in the name of jihad. The first thing he mentions is that they seek to attack the marakib al-jawiyya, so they seek to attack the airplanes, or that was those that travel on upon the ground, which were buses and likes of those. And they established this matter of tafjir, in explosions. And so they explode these things, they explode these things, they kill the masses, kill large amounts of people, and destroy things in that matter. And no doubt, this is not jihad, but this is a surah min surah al-irhab. هذه سورة من سور الإرهاب. It's a matter or a manner from the different ways that terrorism occurs. That's one way. Another way, as mentioned, is that they will take or seek to assassinate the rulers and the kings of nations. Or they will seek to kill those that are in their place, whether it be those that are below them in rank, or those that are establishing the rule for their cause. So, for example, police, an army. And no doubt this brings about fawda. It brings about chaos in of itself. So this is another thing that they'll claim. They'll claim that they are bringing about jihad and establishing jihad, but in reality, what they are doing is establishing chaos within the land and bringing about fear into the hearts of the people. Hence why it's referred to as terrorism. It brings about terror. It's not jihad. And then another example as well is that they seek to destroy places of business. To seek to destroy the places of business, or destroy places where the wealth is kept, and steal from the wealth of that land in order to harm it in terms of its economy. So they seek to attack the economy of a land. All of these things they will mention again they'll say is jihad. However, its reality is that it is, as we mentioned, irhab. Naam. And so Shaykh Zaidi mentions thereafter what is the islah, or what is the ilaj rather? What is the remedy for this? Like, how can this be rectified? How do we rectify these things? This marad, this illness. And how do we protect against this stuff? Or these affairs that occur? And so, he mentions that لا يحسنها إلا العلماء السلفيون الربانيون الذين ينطلقون في توعيتهم للخلق والوعظ وإرشادهم من منطلق الرسل الكرام والأنبياء العظام. So this cannot be established except by way of the ulama as-salafiyun al-rabbaniyun. Ulama, that's clear who they are. The ulama. Salafiyun, inshallah, that's clear who they are. Or that follow the manhaj of the Salaf. What is meant by Rabbaniyun? Rabbani. I would say, Fulan is alim Rabbani. No.
Those who are grounded in knowledge.
Those that are grounded in knowledge, no, it's one thing. The alim Rabbani. Who's the alim al-Rabbani? No.
Someone with wisdom.
Wisdom, of course. But what is it that is significant about the alim al-Rabbani? Oh, that not necessarily that. Focus on the tarbiyah of the people. And how is that done? By beginning with the usul. And it's mentioned about Shaykh Zayd as well in another place. The alim al-Rabbani is the one that teaches the small knowledge before the big. So he teaches the small knowledge. He grounds the people in knowledge. And then after, they seek knowledge in the bigger matters. So he cultivates them upon sound knowledge. And this is what is needed. Because no doubt all of these actions that are done, the usul of these actions, the foundations of these actions is jahl. The foundation of the actions is the ignorance of the people doing them, or ignorance of the people calling them to do it. Naam? And so, if you have the da', if you have the ailment which is jahl, no doubt, with that, or with the remedy for that ailment, of course, it has to be within knowledge and its people. And so, here he mentions that upon them is to return the matter back to the scholars that will teach the teachings of the Anbiya wa Rusul. And this is a matter in which you teach people the wahi, you're teaching the people the revelation, and it's a means of bringing life to the hearts. It gives life to the hearts. Knowledge, sound knowledge, brings life to the hearts from the amrad, from the illnesses that are there within, and the illnesses that are within the nufus, now within people's selves and souls. However, we know that this is irshad, this is a direction and guidance from the scholars. And even if this is done effectively, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا
محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Now, so we mentioned that this is how it begins. Da'wah. Yani teaching the people, removing the jahl. Because these things are, or these actions of irhab, yani terrorism, the likes of that, is basis and is rooted deeply in jahl. Rooted deeply in, yani, ignorance. However, Shaykh Zayd goes on to mention that it's possible that this won't benefit. As Allah Ta'ala mentions, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ لَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Indeed, you do not guide those that are beloved to you. However, as Allah Ta'ala guides whom He wills. So He mentions, وَمَتَى لَمْ تَنْفَعَ الْمَوَائِذ وَالْكُتُبِ فَسَوْفَ يَنْفَعَ اللَّهُ بِالسَّيْفِ الْحَقِّ الَّذِي وَضَعَهُ اللَّهُ فِي يَدِ السُّلْطَانِ الْمُسْلِمِ. And so when this admonition, essentially the knowledge has come to them and it's not benefited, when that knowledge is not benefited, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring about the benefit by way of the sayf, by way of the sword, which Allah ta'ala has placed within the hand of the sultan, in the hand of the ruler. What's meant by way of that?
Fighting the Khawarij.
Fighting against them. But when we say the ruler as well, I feel like at least half people know the answer. Let's get to say. Now, so we said the first thing is that you give them down. These people that have caused this harm and fasad within the ard. We give them down, and this is by way of the ulama rabbaniyun. And it's possible that some of them don't accept that. So what happens then? And the message, the safe, the sword. What's meant by the sword?
Kill them.
That only kill them. Essentially, it comes down to the matter of their execution, because that now is a ibra. Now that's a lesson for those that follow. Those that follow, that believe that this is the way forward, then they know what will be their response. Now yustatab, inshallah. Yustatab. So it's sought from him tawbah. When lam yutub, if he doesn't make tawbah, fayuqtal, then he's an individual he's made an example of for those that come after. And this is something, as the Shaykh he mentions, raḥimahullāh, Shaykh Zayd mentions, that is placed within the hand of the sultan. That is placed within the hand of the ruler. So if the ruler gives that particular ruling of doing this towards these individuals, then we know that it's placed for that particular reason. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And so this is what is mentioned here in relation to this matter, that jihad, first and foremost, we say is with the ruler, along with the ruler. And that a person doesn't go out his own self and say that he does it by himself, without being led by anyone else. Because this leads to fawda, this leads to chaos. Because everyone says that he's going to fight his own cause. Now one says he's going to fight his own cause. Everyone goes out to fight their own respective cause without being led by any man. And it leads to, as we said, chaos. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Jazakumullah khairan. Wa barakallahu feekum. We'll leave it there for the lesson, inshaAllah ta'ala, as the salah is fast approaching. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khairan. Before we end, I was going through when I was looking for my books for today's lesson, I found this particular book by Shaykh Rabi' ibn Hadi al-Madkhali, يعني أسباب الانحراف وتوجيهات المنهجية. يعني, so the reasons for deviation and some advices regarding manhaj. And I realized I had 2 copies of it. So I'll give one copy to, inshallah, any individual that can relate to me what we discussed. So, what I mean by that is he can tell me the Ashr al-Mubashirin bil-Jannah, and then he can tell me how is the rule established. We'll leave it at that, those 2 things. Ashr al-Mubashirin bil-Jannah and how is the rule established. Sahel, inshallah. Tfaddal. The Ashr al-Mubashirin bil-Jannah, please, first.
Abu Bakr, Uthman, Ali, Omar, Talha, Sa'ad, Sa'id, Ibn Abi Waqas, someone, Abu Jarrah.
Abu Jarrah, close.
I don't know. I forgot. I don't know the rest.
The Labas. Anyone else? Khas is assist. The man of. He said Zubair already, sir. He said Zubair. Abu Ubaidah. Mu'ad. La. Said Talha. Sa'ad said.
Abdurrahman.
Rahman al-Auf. There's one more. He didn't say Zubair? Khalas. So this is 10. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Then the ruler. How do we establish the ruler Islamically? Yeah. Al-Hal wal-Aqd. What does that mean? Ulama, Umara,
the people skilled in politics,
skilled in politics,
and military leaders.
Military leaders. That's one.
Then, if the leader specifies who will be next,
The leader specifies will be next.
and the one who seizes control if there is a vacancy.
That's his control if there's a vacancy. Nah. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fik. Allah mubarak. Yeah, that's excellent. Jazakallah khair. Sallallahu tfaddal. خلق فيك. صلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.